celebrating and remembering a life of integrity, service, community, and love. A tribute to the late Curtis Anthony Ward, former ambassador of Jamaica to the United Nations. That's up next on Carib Nation.
From Treasure Beach in rural Jamaica to the United Nations and the global stage, Ambassador Curtis Ward navigated the geopolitical landscape as an international statesman extraordinaire. From humble beginnings with the nurturing and guidance of his parents, he won a competitive scholarship to a premier Jamaican high school where he matriculated before migrating to the United States to attend Howard University. There he earned his Bachelor of Arts and then a Juris Doctor and later a Master of Law from Georgetown University. After serving in Jamaica's Foreign Service in the Washington Embassy in the 1970s, he founded his own law firm, practicing law for 19 years in Washington, D.C., building a reputation of integrity and trust and dedication to service to the immigrant community. Appointed by the Jamaican government in 1999 as Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of Jamaica to the United Nations with special responsibility for Security Council affairs, he served from January 2000 to December 2001. He developed a lasting commitment to international peace and security, human rights, and conflict prevention. Earning the respect of his Security Council's colleague, he served as the first chairman of the Security Council Working Group on Peacekeeping Operations. The September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks on the United States added counterterrorism to Ambassador Ward's portfolio. He joined the UN Counter-Terrorism Committee, the CTC, in May of 2002 as Expert Advisor and Liaison with regional and international organizations. He developed and supervised the UN CTC Technical Assistance Facilitation Program and served as the CTC's principal proponent and advocate for global and national counterterrorism capacity building. In bilateral meeting with over 100 permanent representatives at the United Nations, he encouraged government to implement counterterrorism capacity building mandates, and he keynote conferences and presented on counterterrorism panel in over 30 countries. He brought his vast experience and knowledge to international counseling, including 8 months in West Africa as head of a joint UN ECOWAS mission in 2008 to 2009, investigating the disappearance and death of some 55 West Africans in the Gambia. He has guest lectured at numerous prestigious institutions, including several lectures at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. In academia, as former adjunct professional lecturer at the Elliott School of International Affairs, George Washington University, and currently as adjunct professor in the Homeland Security Graduate Program at the University of the District of Columbia. He has a busy media presence as a host of Carib Nation Television, publisher of the Ward Post, and his podcast, Real Talk with Ambassador Curtis Ward. And his analysis and views are in high demand by radio, television, and the printed press in the Caribbean region. A devoted husband for 48 years to his wife Sonia, together they raised 3 children, Maisha, Tamara, and Kareem. His journey from Jamaica to the global stage is a journey of service and achievements. And as an international statesman, integrity and morality are the hallmark of Ambassador Curtis Ward's professionalism.
Today, a sad occasion brings us together to pay tribute to an icon of the Caribbean. We're going to talk about the late Ambassador Curtis Anthony Ward and his contribution to the Caribbean community. With me to look back at some memories and to highlight some of the strengths of this man are Hazel Gaudette, Nigel Scott, and Gabriel Christian, all of whom have worked with Ambassador Ward. And let me start with you, Nigel, because you have worked with Ambassador Ward many years, going back to the early days when Caribbean people in this area did not always have a good name. They were fighting, at the time, importation of drugs and often got the blame for what was happening in the community. And it was a difficult time for young students, especially in this area. And you and Curtis would know some of those issues and some of the work that had to be done to keep our community together. So I'd ask you to look back at some of those incidents and his advocacy for the immigrant community in the Washington area, especially.
Thank you, Doris. It's a pleasure to be here, and I know that this is an occasion for memorial, but we also have to be grateful that we had the time and the opportunity to work with someone as distinguished as Ambassador Ward. My first contacts with Ambassador Ward was on the campus at Howard University. We were both students. I had been there a couple of years before him, and he came as we met as undergraduate students. And our first contact was as members of the Caribbean Students Association at Howard. And back then, that would have been in the late 60s, there was a lot of, if you know, that was at the height of the civil rights movement. That was the year, 68 was the year that Martin Luther King was killed.
Right.
And so there was a lot of agitation and activity on campus. And so the Caribbean Student Association was in the midst of all of that. As a matter of fact, I believe in 67, there was a all-white campus shut down, and students took over the admin building. So there was an element of activism on the campus. Off campus, on the other hand, the Caribbean community was not that active. There was only essentially in the 60s one organization at the time, that was CAIO. The Trinidad and Tobago Association, Jamaican Nats, and several other nationals and several organizations started up around the late 60s, became active around the late 60s, early 70s. And Curtis was an active part of the formation of the Jamaican National Association. And he was also active in other Caribbean organizations, because as a result of that activism, CAIO sort of took over the activities, and there was an effort to create Caribbean-wide organizations. And so there was another organization that was formed, Caribbean Council of Caribbean Organizations, that was in the early 70s. And Curtis was involved in that, along with Leo Edwards and a lot of people who have now passed.
And Leo was his mentor too, I recall.
Yeah.
Yes. So what happened after that was that Curtis graduated and started law school. I, again, was in law school at the same time as Curtis. I was a senior when he came in as a freshman. And so we interacted in that way, as my being a senior and Curtis a freshman. We used to have meetings among the small cadre of Caribbean students who were law students at the time. There weren't many. There was about 6 or 8 of us at most. And so we would meet, occasionally, and we as seniors would talk to the newcomers, essentially, about studies and law school and stuff like that. Then we both started practices in Curtis, I think after law school, worked at the embassy for a while, I think. I'm not sure. But
Yeah,
I
he had a
worked
short
at the
stint at
embassy for
the
a while.
Jamaican embassy.
And
Yeah.
then after he left the embassy, he came out into private practice, and I was also in private practice. Coincidentally, we were across the street from each other on Georgia Avenue. He was on one side of Georgia Avenue, and I was on the other side of Georgia Avenue. And we often would exchange ideas and, how we would be working on our practices and some of the issues and clients. Curtis did a lot of immigration, a lot more immigration than I did. So sometimes if I had a client, for example, who was involved in a marriage situation and wanted their immigration documents regularized, I would refer them to Curtis and vice versa. So we had a close interaction in those days. That would have been I would say to the mid to the later 70s, going into the 80s. But there was always a strong element of advocacy in Curtis, going back from when we were on campus as students. He was always a leader in the community. He was always a leader among the campus. Campus was a kind of a structured place. You had Trinis on one side and Jamaicans on the other side, etc. So, but Curtis was a leader in the Jamaican side, and then you had the Trinis, because there was always that clash of cultures on the campus. But we got along. It was all communal. The real issue came about in the community because there was an influx of drugs into the community, into the Washington, D.C. area in the late 70s, early 80s. Mm-hmm. And also, there was an influx into the community of the Jamaican community of the Rastafarian group. People did not know about the Rastafarian group. And so when things developed that the drug issue became so large that they wanted to blame someone for the marijuana that was coming into the city, the city immediately latched on to the Caribbean community and started to blame the Rastafarians and Rastafarian movement as the people responsible for and marijuana was illegal. People were being arrested left, right, and center. There were raids all over trying to get people locked up for marijuana. Right. And so when things really got bad, the city organized a program called Caribbean Cruise. Now, Caribbean Cruise was an exercise to root out the drugs in the community. And it was the responsibility was that the claim was that the Rastafarians were the ones who was bringing the drugs into the city. At that point in time, we were both practicing. Curtis was doing immigration. I was doing more criminal work. And so I would be before the courts, and there would be Rastafarians who were arrested. And the judges would take a very dismal view of them. I remember representing a guy, and this is just a personal note, and the night before I had to go to court for a trial. There was a program on TV, news, talking about the Rastafarians and the drugs into the city. So I went into court the next morning, and my client is a Rastafarian getting ready for trial. And they said openly it was the Jamaicans. And the judge got on the bench and made some remarks. And I said, Your Honor, with those remarks, I believe it is improper for you to try this case. You might have to, I will have to ask you to recuse yourself, because it appears as though you have a bias against my client. Because, well, that was another story. But as to what happened on that incident, he didn't take my case. We were put out. We were put out of the court. He didn't take my case. But in the community was where Curtis took a lead as part of the Caribbean community to organize the opposition to Caribbean cruise. And I talked about the Council of Caribbean Organizations. It was within that Council of Caribbean Organizations, the Jamaica National Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Association, CAIO, we organized an opposition to Caribbean cruise. And we had to go before the council, we had to go before the chief of police, and Curtis was the lead advocate on that. He was bent on telling the authorities that the whole issue of the Rastafarians was misunderstood, and to educate them on the religious aspect of Rastafarianism. And so that was how that went about. But that was his advocacy in the early days, and that went on for a couple of years, that whole thing, until the Caribbean cruise issue was abandoned. I had to say it was a victory, because the claim was retracted, and the police, chief of police and the others had to admit that there was no basis for the claim that the drugs that were coming into the city was as a result of the influx of the Rastafarians or Rastafarianism. And so that was the early years with Curtis.
Yeah, that was profiling, I suppose, more so than anything else.
It absolutely was. I mean, guys were being picked up on the street for no reason.
Yeah.
If 3 or 4 guys were on the corner, they were picked up and arrested, and they were charged, but the quantity of marijuana that was coming in could no way have been the result of what was happening on the street. It had to have been coming from somewhere else.
Yeah.
But eventually it got to the Rastafarians who smoked marijuana. And so they were the ones who were arrested down below, when the folks who were doing the importation and the large quantity of the marijuana were going off scotch-free.
Of course, as
so
always.
That was part of what the struggle was there.
Yeah.
And this was in the Superior Court, it was in the District Court, and it was also in the courts, in all of the courts in Montgomery County, Prince George. It was in the whole DMV area that is. The program was centered in DC, but it covered the
entire area.
Yeah. So we had it was a big fight, but Curtis was the lead advocate on that.
Yeah, I remember just briefly picking up on that, because my husband had just founded the Guyana National Association, which was new in the whole scheme of things. And so that's how we knew the name. We knew that this Jamaican was speaking on behalf of the Caribbean people, but GNA was too young to get involved. They needed to sort of observe and understand what was happening. and before they put their feet in the pond, so to speak. So I remember the group being very cautious about what was happening, but at the same time paying attention to the fact that Caribbean people were being picked up
Yeah, all over. I mean,
everywhere.
it wasn't just Jamaicans,
Yes, yeah, it
people
was
from the
Caribbean people.
Caribbean period.
Yes,
And if you had an accent, police would sometimes target you for that reason.
exactly, exactly. Hazel, do you have anything to add at this point, or was that before your time?
That was before my, this is like a lesson for me. I'm like, ooh, I'm all engrossed because yeah, when I came in was around 1985, 86. So all of that I was
Yes,
still knowledgeable of the GNA and the ICS and the NAJASO and the CAIU because they were still active and still
right.
meeting at Curtis and coming for information.
Yes,
And yeah, so Mr.
yes,
Edwards, yeah, Leopold, he was also a part of that. So yeah, so I got to know about these things, but those things happened way before I
yeah.
got, yeah.
Gabriel, I know that Curtis was your mentor, and you have great respect and admiration for the work and the compassion and the passion that Curtis has for his work. And I know that you can speak quite a bit. So let's get started.
Well, so thank you very much, Sister Doris, and for doing this, and Larry Sinders of Carib Nation. We all appreciate Carib Nation always illuminating our condition and our leaders. I want to really thank our brother Nigel Scott. I've known Nigel. I met Nigel practicing law, and he's been an elder statesman in the Caribbean legal fraternity, and someone who I look to and with whom I'm quite friendly. And of course, Sister Hazel. I've known, Sister Hazel's sister, Gwen, and I attended University of DC together. And I first met Hazel at a party, and she was dancing up a storm, and she's a very nice and gracious person, as is Brother Nigel, as you are. Curtis was not, we say Ambassador Ward because that was later in life when Curtis became the Jamaican ambassador to the UN Security Council. But Curtis was the quintessential Caribbean leader. I like to call him the Prime Minister of the Caribbean community because he did not look at things through the prism of Jamaica. He was a Jamaican, he was a proud Jamaican, but he always saw himself as a Caribbean leader. So when I listened to Brother Nigel talk about Caribbean cruise, I remember that quite well. It came about during the time I was living, that period when I was living the University of DC Business School and entering Georgetown University Law Center. And I remember there was a club on Georgia Avenue called Tropics nightclub. I remember, Nigel, that club was raided.
Right.
And actually never survived. I think after that raid, it closed down.
Yep.
But Curtis's view and his mentor, Leo Edwards, who is a blessed memory now, like Curtis is, their view was that the Caribbean community's name, or good name, was being tarnished. For instance, the Caribbean, the British West Indies Islands, Jamaica, Trinidad, we don't produce cocaine, right? Marijuana, yes, but not cocaine. And it was wrong to, the Caribbean is one of the biggest cruise areas in the world, right? That's tourism. It was wrong to sort of designate a program, an anti-drug program, as Caribbean cruise because in the very naming, it was shaming of an entire community.
Yeah.
And tarnishing an entire community, which had a noble history in academia. So Curtis came from that view that we had an obligation to protect the good name of our community and to be good stewards of the legacy of Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Guyanese and Grenadians, Barbadians, Dominicans, all of us. That anything that touched one of us touched all of us. So his view was that, be it with crime prevention, if it was a question of representing us with regard to trade matters like the Caribbean Basin Initiative, representing us on Capitol Hill, representing us on the state level. He was the first chairman of the Maryland Governor's Commission on Caribbean Affairs. And actually, when the commission was re-engaged under Governor, it started under Governor O'Malley. When it continued under Governor Westmore, he was again the chairperson and chairman rather, and he only stepped down in August of last year. Almost as if, he felt that his time was coming to an end. Sometimes hindsight is 2020. You begin to see certain things happening. But as Brother Nigel said, and Sister Hazel confirmed, you had the National Council of Caribbean Organizations and COCA, you had NAJASO, you had Jamaica Maryland Association, you had the Caribbean Commission in Maryland. He was always saying to us, the younger ones, that it's no good to be simply a lawyer, to have gone to Howard or Georgetown, wherever you went to school, and you earn a fee, but you do not take a moment to do your share of community service. So his philosophy was that we had to show community love. Community love meant you had to volunteer. And I remember at the repast, Sister Hazel talking about Curtis and his grace, his kindness, extended to cutting fees for people who were less than and unable financially to afford. And so I know that Sister Sonia wouldn't like to hear this, but oftentimes when you're a community servant, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Right? Because Nigel will, I'm sure, appreciate that. When you're a migrant, you come to the United States, sometimes things are very hard.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a heart, and Curtis mentored us in the value system of generosity of spirit, of kindness and grace, and the importance of volunteerism, right? Today, too many of our young people, I must say, you say you have some sauce and black pudding and pilau or bust-up shot or whatever it is, oil down in Grenada or jerk chicken in the basement, they'll show up and they will try to bust down the door. But when you ask them to come to a meeting where we're going to be discussing education or science and technology or agriculture partnerships, they will maybe tell you, well, my mother died yesterday, my grandfather died the week before, and my house burned down last night. And every other excuse, or the dog ate my homework to not give service. Although I must say, in the last days and in recent years, with the Caribbean Disaster Relief and Recovery Alliance, people like Lawton Sargent and John Green, we've seen people coming out for Hurricane Melissa, events having to do with Hurricane Ivan in Grenada, the volcano in St. Vincent. I must say that there still is a strong culture that Curtis and Nigel and others of that generation, God bless them, showed by example the importance of mentorship so that we can still gather and contribute to our community's welfare. And I think that will be his lasting legacy, and that is the legacy of community service.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, regardless of what organizations were formed, Curtis knew about each one and kept in touch, kept a sort of a finger in each one so that he always could make the connections. If anything was needed, he had that way of that diplomacy about him, that he could bring organizations together. And a lot of that came, of course, because his mentor was late Leopold Edwards.
Yes.
And that was his passion about bringing groups together. And Hazel, I'd like you to talk about what you observed in his interactions with not only the organizations, but people, his clients from the Caribbean in various scenarios. I'm sure you have some interesting stories.
Yes. So I always smile at this because initially when I met Curtis, I met him through a roommate of mine who was trying to get me a job. Because, when you're from the Caribbean, you need 2 and 3 jobs. So I was in school and I had one and I needed another. And so she told me about, this Jamaican attorney. He's really good. He's great, and stuff. So I called and he said, come in. And I went in and immediately we formed a bond. And what I noticed about him as I started working with him, he was very compassionate. He was all about learning and teaching. And so when I went in there, I was a marketing major. And within 6 months, I just switched my degree and wanted to be a paralegal because the things that came through the mail, because I was checking the mail and I'll see deportations and, this person, and I'd say, what is that? And he would sit me down and explain this guy is,
Yeah.
he's in jail and did it. I'm like, oh, so, and I would ask questions and he would sit there patiently and just tell me the 212C and the this and the, and it was so interesting to me. And so right away I said, I like this. And before you know it, I started getting more and more involved. And every time I would have a question or I see something, he would sit me down with as busy as he was to explain to me how it worked. And eventually I just changed my major to the point I stayed with Curtis for probably like 12 years. And when I left there, I was well sought by all of the largest law firms in Maryland and in DC, actually. Baker McKenzie, Jenkins and Gilchrist,
Wow.
all of the high firms. They paid my first jump in salary from Curtis to my new job was $15,000. That was like in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, he taught me everything that I needed to know. I mean, he taught me so well. They were running after me. If I put my resume out, I got 15 calls. Yep, first one.
Fantastic.
So he was
Wow,
a
what a
very
legacy.
good. Yeah, that's the legacy. I
Yeah.
told people he was instrumental in my career in terms of that. So I never forget that. Yeah, he was
Yes.
a great teacher. Now, in terms of his benevolence, that was a different story. So I told people I was the gatekeeper. You got to get to me before you get to Curtis, because I realized that we're not making any money. Curtis, what? Oh, no. I look at the return. I'm like, this guy didn't pay. Okay, just I'm going to send a letter. I said, I'm sending a letter. Then he says, I have to review it. I'm like, no, you're not. And we have this fight every day. And so I see the bills coming in. They'll call. Oh, I need to speak to Mr. Ward. Sir, you owe $15.25. No. And Curtis is like, just let them. No, Curtis, no. And so we always fighting. Then I'll pick up the phone. I'll call Sonia, like, listen, Curtis and I. So he was always so compassionate. He always wants to hear your story and see if he can help. In the meantime, to his detriment.
He's not
Thank God
thinking
for
about the
Sonia.
cost. Yeah.
Yes, that she held it down while he said, I'm like, you're giving away our services. And he was like, they need me. I'm like, Curtis, but you're dying. Yeah, he was very, very community oriented. Everybody would call Curtis Ward. Oh, it's Curtis. Call Curtis Ward. Call Curtis Ward. Everybody knew Curtis Ward.
And
of
he
course, I
never
knew
said no.
Yeah, because
He
they
never
were.
said no. Yeah.
He can't say no.
Yeah.
And Mr. Edwards is the same thing.
Let me
Neither
jump
one
in
of
here.
them.
Let me jump in here and defend Curtis, because
There's no defending Nigel.
as a brother attorney in those days, starting your practice, you wanted clients to come in the door, and so part of it was trying to get clients in the door. There weren't. I mean, when we started out, there weren't many people from the Caribbean who practiced law or who were in private practice.
Private practice, yeah.
And so the first instinct was not to come to us for some things. And when they came to us as say, I going to my brother, expecting that my brother will help me out for free, or not charge me as much as John across the street would charge me. No, we had to navigate through that. I mean, these days it's different, but we had to navigate through that process in those early days.
Yeah.
And that's those are the kinds of things sometimes that Curtis and I would talk about. How do you get the clients in the door, and how do you get them to understand that a payment is required, or payments are required in order for us to continue to serve them? But at the same time, we were also community representatives. We were active in the organizations. So we,
place.
A fine rope to walk on.
And we were wearing two hats. We were community advocates, advocating for the community, but we were also lawyers having to make a living.
Yeah. And
So
also,
it was a delicate balance.
that
Yeah.
place. And
It
I
was a delicate
remember
balance.
also him being so helpful. Like, for example, I remember when Gabe walked through the door after law school and would mentor, Curtis would mentor him as well. And I even remember a whole lot of folks, Lola Zadie, Andrea Brown, who, I mean, like a lot of the younger attorneys passed through Curtis Warden Associates, a lot of them. Yeah. He was very,
As you
very,
mentioned,
uh,
he was such a teacher, as you
yeah.
mentioned, because I started working in the community once after my husband started the GNA, and I got involved with some other things. Um, but when I got into the media on a larger scale, if we met somewhere, if he'd give me a ride home, it was an education on that ride home.
Yeah.
He'd break down exactly what happened, why it happened, the story behind it, so that as a journalist, it helped me to have a foundation on which to write or ask questions. But he was always in teaching mode. He
Always,
was always
always.
willing to explain, break things down so that you understood and you got the true picture. He wanted everybody to get the true picture. He
Yeah.
wanted to make sure you knew the truth and that you understood it well so that nobody was left in doubt. And I think that was major, well, his major interest. Gabe, you want to add to that?
I think it's very important for us to maybe every year, those of us who remember him and people like Leo and yourself, Darius, and Nigel and Hazel, to do a dinner, the Curtis Ward commemoration dinner, where we can have a scholarship for a student at an area school, to give them in hand so we can continue the legacy. Because I mentioned in a little program, we did a program at Andrews Air Force Base for the veterans. It was only about after 20 years of doing Curtis that I discovered Curtis was an old cadet. I'm not sure, whether Hazel was a cadet. She looks like a cadet, and she
Used to be
behaved like a cadet. She must have been a girl guide or something, or brownie.
cadet.
Yeah, I was a girl guide.
I was
So
a
Hazel, were you a
cadet.
cadet too?
That gun on my shoulder, boy.
Can you imagine that? In
Yes.
Trinidad? What about you,
Indeed.
Nigel? Were you a cadet?
No, I wasn't. I was a Boy Scout.
Close.
Yeah, I
So I
was a
know.
girl guide as well.
Well,
I
there
was
we
a
go. So
cadet.
we all service. We all of us on this panel. It's funny. I mentioned at the eulogy, birds of a feather flock together. All of us
Together.
on this panel here, Nigel is a Boy Scout. I didn't know
Yes.
he was a cadet. He
Yeah.
is telling me now because the cadets in the early days, Nigel, didn't have any women. The first
Oh, I
female
know they
cadet I
had
met was
cadets in Trinidad, and I knew about the cadets. But
yes.
I just didn't join the cadets at my high school.
Were you at KRC?
No, I went to St. Mary's.
St. Mary's. So you're CIC.
Yeah, I'll see.
So we had one of your cadets here. Squadron Leader Cross was a CIC boy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
He started in he was born in 1917, so he would have started sometime in the late 20s, early 30s, and was in the Royal Air Force. And in the program that was distributed, Doris did the documentary that's on YouTube. She remembers him. Curtis has his hand around his shoulder outside the White House. We're getting ready to go into the White House. And it was in the course of that program, Curtis said, when I was at Manchester High School, I was a cadet. But he was on his first parade and someone stepped on the back of his shoe. And when he tried to go back to get the shoe, his commander said, you got to leave the shoe alone, and keep marching. So he marched with one shoe on and one shoe off.
Oh my.
So I don't think he stayed long, but he had that sort of military discipline in the sense of commitment to duty.
Yes,
He believed that it was important for us,
yeah,
in order to make our lives meaningful, for us to be dutiful to the communities within which we lived, right? It was not so much that, well, I went to college or I had a professional degree, but what is the quality of my service? What shall be the quality of my service?
absolutely.
And I think it's that kind of continuity that I see in Brother Nigel. So, Brother Nigel, if you're a head of school in at Howard, of Curtis, who came here in 68. You must have come here in 67 or 65.
I started in 66.
Amazing.
I started in 66.
Boy,
And, you know, the Caribbean community, as I said, the only organization at that time was CAIO.
CAIO, yeah.
And then by 1970, the Trinidad and Tobago Association had evolved from a soccer team into the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Washington.
You're talking about Harold McKell?
Yes.
That was before Harold. I mean, Harold was there, but the association started out as a soccer team.
With Lincoln, what's Lincoln's name again?
No, that was before Lincoln.
Amazing.
That's a different story that could be told about the evolution of soccer.
That's soccer, yes.
And the association and how, you know, this is Curtis's program, so I can't talk about it. But that's another story that can be told
Another day, right?
about, you know, that whole issue of soccer and the role that the Trinidad and Tobago Association played in soccer and in the soccer team and how soccer became important.
Yeah, that's true.
A brief note. The first Black soccer team to play in the Washington Soccer League was a team called the Trinidad All-Stars that first played in the soccer league around 1964, started playing in the league in 64, 65. I came in 66 and started playing with that team. That is what evolved from the Trinidad All-Stars became the Trinidad and Tobago Association, DC, and was incorporated in 1970. But the important thing that you talk about community and about the Caribbean community, Trinidad All-Stars, when it started, was primarily a group of Trinidadians. But you had on that team guys from Jamaica, guys from Grenada, guys from Larry Rawlins from St. Kitts Nevis. You had Sanguinetti from Grenada, Williams from Jamaica, and you had a doctor who is still, there's a doctor who is, I don't know if he's still practicing, Dr. Nixon Asomani, who was from Ghana. And so
what was his name, Nigel?
Dr. Nixon Asomani.
Okay, of East Indian origin?
No, he was from Ghana.
Ghana.
He was from
Guyana.
Oh, Ghana, not Guyana.
Ghana. There were Guyanese on the team too. You know, there was Bronny Alfonso, a Hazel, one of the biggest Hazelwood boy, Billy Hazelwood.
Oh yeah.
You know, those were some of the guys who played on Trinidad All-Stars back in the early and mid 60s.
And the Caribbean was much more cohesive at that time.
So that's what the point I wanted to make. That while the team was Trinidad All-Stars, it was really a Caribbean and international team.
Right.
And so that was where the Caribbean unity and that was the only counter that existed apart from CAIO. See, CAIO was doing the social and welfare aspect. The Trinidad All-Stars played soccer and fought racism at the other level on the soccer field.
Yeah.
And that predated any action at Howard University or Lincoln Phillips or all of that. Yeah,
that was where Leo came in with CAIO. I think that's
an aside, really. I didn't mean to bring, but I just wanted to say the Caribbean, the whole Caribbean, the concept of the Caribbean as a unitary entity,
the cohesion
existed throughout.
Yeah, the cohesion of the Caribbean. Yes, Gabriel.
Yes, I believe this is a very important point that Brother Nigel Scott is making, because what he's saying is we made an impact when we did so as one cohesive unit. So even if the name may have been Trinidad All-Stars, It was really a pan-Caribbean team. And
Right.
one could even say pan-African because there's a Ghanaian on there. And this is a sort of the long arc of continuity that starts with the second or third African-American college graduate in U.S. history was John Russwurm, who started Freedom's Journal in 1847. He went to Bowdoin College in Maine. He was born in Port Antonio, Jamaica, of an English father and a Jamaican Afro-descended mother. Came to the U.S., went to Bowdoin College, West Indian student again, started Freedom's Journal to promote the abolition of slavery. Slavery had been abolished in the British West Indies, but not in the United States. After he didn't pick up traction, he went to Liberia, he went to Africa and became the governor of Maryland. So the governor of the state of Maryland in Africa was a Jamaican who had gone to school in the United States. And that state became part of what is now called the country of Liberia.
Liberia, yeah.
So Westmore is not the first West Indian descended person to be governor of Maryland. There was someone before him.
You tell him that. You tell him that.
Exactly. I was like,
and I wanted to have told him that on the 24th of January, but he left early. So he had already gone. But I didn't know of John Russwurm until Curtis Ward. It was Curtis, because towards the end, Curtis created the Ward Post, and he used that as a platform, and I hope we can continue it, to promote Caribbean unity, diplomacy, advocating for Caribbean interest. And he also was the founder of the Caribbean Research and Policy Center, where we would gather to promote Caribbean unity as well, and CPAC, which is the Caribbean Political Action Committee, with people like, of course, Nigel Scott and others. And so, you know, again, he believed he was the quintessential organization man.
Yes.
He believed as a true cadet, as a true Boy Scout. I guess he may not have been a Boy Scout like Nigel or cadet like Hazel. And Hazel, I want to ask, what school did you attend in Trinidad?
So I was about to interject, but then I didn't want to segue. So when I was a cadet, I was in Grenada.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so when the revolution came about, I was a part that same Friday, whatever that was, that they were teaching us to use guns and say we will never have to use a gun as cadets, right? But they just showed us how to use it, put it here, bring it down, and lay on the ground and shoot. They said, but you will never ever have to do that. But guess what? That came that same week, the revolution started, and guess what? All of the cadets, they had guns. All the kids on the street, they had guns. Yeah. I didn't, my mother dare not let me go in the street, but yeah, all the cadets were with their guns in the street. It was crazy.
That is something that is worthy of a separate program.
I know, right?
Because I didn't know that part, but I suspected as much because the cadets were in Grenada.
Yeah, so it was Grenada. Yeah, I went to Grenada when I was about 9.
So what high school? Were you at a convent or?
Anglican High School, AHS. Anglican High School, yeah.
Indeed.
Yep.
So coming back to organization, that is what Curtis really, to me, his life reflects well. The primacy of organization as a tool for community development. It's hard to be able to build a nation or build a community on your own. If you're on your own and so forth, it's hard. I mean, I've known Nigel supporting Caribbean organizations pretty much as long as I've been here. As long as I've been a lawyer. Hazel, same thing. You see Hazel. And it's funny, Nigel and Hazel? My wife and I have this discussion all the time. Like with Doris Dean. You see the same faces all the time. I mean, no disrespect. But, sometimes we feel, it's the same old donkeys doing the work. And really, True. My hope is that with Curtis's passing, we can do the best we can, as I said at the eulogy, to pass the baton to a younger generation that will understand, that you have to make a contribution because, the bookends of life, that is the birth and the death, aren't the most important. It's what happens
in between.
Right.
And what are you going to say if you've not really taken a moment away from your family? It's a sacrifice, huh? I mean, Hazel tells us the exact same thing about charging the fee. The thing about it is, Hazel, is you go ahead and squeeze people, and I'm sure Nigel can appreciate that. Then you may make some money, but ultimately that person may never come back.
Yeah.
Because they felt that the way you treated them was so fee-centric and not humanitarian, that you lose the ability to accrue a long time affinity. Because to me, and Nigel, you can chime in on this, it's a long-term affinity in the community that builds, to me, sustainability of your business. If people know,
Yeah.
and if they say, boy, you go by Nigel, boy, he'll cut you a little slack and so on. Go by Nigel. You'll give them some tea. If you have something stronger than that, he may give them some of that too. And so
But
that
Gabe,
gospel
it's
beaters.
not taking advantage though. That's the problem.
It's a happy
It
medium.
is a thin line. Listen,
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree
it's
with
we
you.
need the
It's
Hazel.
not
a very
taking
fine line.
advantage.
We need.
Okay, there's some of them, and I got the books. So I
need,
pull it, and I'm like, this is a continuous.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a little breather, but don't take it. No, we
advantage
got
of
to
it.
eat
Yeah.
too. Hello.
Yeah.
I'm with Hazel.
Yes.
We need the Hazels of this
Yeah.
world, Nigel.
Of course.
There's
Everybody
I had
needs a Hazel
my own
gatekeeper.
Hazel too. You remember Donna Hazel?
I remember Donna. Yes, Donna used. Oh
I had my
yeah,
Hazel. You remember Donna?
yeah, Donna. Correct. We wanted to say we're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, everybody
Yes,
needs
yeah.
Donna
a
used to
Hazel
tell them.
gatekeeper.
Donna used to say, "Yeah, they used to ask Donna, is he your father?" And she said, "Yeah, he's my daddy."
Yes, yeah. They used to say, I said, I'm the Curtis Ward. Yes, you got to get through me. You want to see Curtis? See me. I'm the gatekeeper.
And I want to say something in to endorse what both Nigel and Hazel are saying. Racism and colonialism has done a number on us. The same people who wouldn't pay Nigel or Curtis or myself do.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to some places like Bethesda.
And pay big money.
and pay
Yes.
big money.
Absolutely.
That is true.
But when they come to our office, they say, well,
Yes.
my
Truth
house
be
burned down
told.
last night, the dog
Now
at my
you're
home.
talking, Gabe.
You know?
Truth be told.
So I mean, look, I'm in the middle of a case without calling names now with a lady from a certain country in Africa who the value of the case, Nigel, if I'd done it, I couldn't do it because I was conflicted out. I'd represented both husband and wife. $7,500. These folks raped her $110,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they have her in litigation now. So I know that there's that bestiality that exists in other communities of ripping off our people because of our people being ignorant about trying to keep the business.
Yeah, within.
Okay? Everybody, is trying to build their community. And we have an element in our society, in our West Indian society. And I'll say it as bluntly, who believes the white man's ice is colder.
Yeah. Yeah. Truth be told.
I'm just saying it.
No,
this is
it's
a
the
program
truth.
where we have to be honest.
Yes.
And until, as West Indians and people of color, we don't give due respect to the Curtis Wards and the Nigel Scotts and the others.
And the Gabriel Christian.
The Gabriel Christians. I was gonna say that.
Gabe, I know your story too. I know your story. Okay.
I wanna say that even with all of that, there's a certain resiliency that the community has shown. I always looked with pride at Curtis, who even after he became ambassador and could have strayed away from the community, and been, outside of the community and survive without having any contact in the community. That Curtis came back. He
submerged
came
himself
back to the community.
Yeah.
And he always gave service.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about community service is that if it is in your blood, if it gets under your skin, you cannot give it up.
Get it out.
And that is what drives Curtis.
Yeah.
Curtis. It what I'm sure drives
Gabe and yourself.
When they call me, whatever I have to do, I say, okay, call me back tomorrow. But definitely, if they don't call me back tomorrow, I find a way to get myself interjected into it somehow or the other.
Yeah.
I don't do it as much as I used to, but my wife used to say, you are the richest, if everybody that you know and who call you for advice pays you, you would be the richest lawyer in town. My late wife, because she knew that it was always a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew that people would call me at all hours, anywhere, and want advice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Christmas Day. You know,
They don't care.
you know, these are the kinds of things. And I know that Curtis was going through that because
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things that we spoke about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even after he had his illness and he went to work as the ambassador, through all of that, Curtis was dedicated to the community.
Yeah.
And I honor that about him.
Yeah, one of the first things he did.
Never turned his back. He never
Yes.
forgot
Where
from
he
whence
came
he
from.
came.
Whence he came. Yeah, when the
And,
last
you know,
hurricane in Jamaica.
that to me is an honorable man of integrity. And Curtis had that
Very high integrity. Yeah,
Yeah.
very high integrity.
and that honesty in dealing. That when you spoke to him,
Yes.
you knew that it was coming
It's coming
From the
genuine.
heart. Yeah, came from the heart. Gabe, you have one more. You have something else to say before we?
Yes, I wanted in this moment, because I apologize. I mean, on behalf of all of us, I apologize to Sonia and ask for her forgiveness because she may have had a bigger house, had a child. You know, I mean, it's true to say, because as Brother Nigel mentioned his late wife, and again, Nigel, our condolences. You couldn't have made it without her.
True.
But when you do what Nigel has done and what Hazel has done and what Brother Curtis did, there's a lot of sacrifice that the family, you know, had to endure. The late nights away from home. Nigel talks about the call on Christmas Day. I remember getting a call on my birthday, which is the first of the year, January 1st, and I left the luncheon and didn't come back after tours, and they had all eaten. The food was cold, and they were not happy. But the call came. And so that is the kind of thing that Curtis had to endure. Because, you know, Sonia, his wife, his daughter Maisha, who's a lawyer, Tamara, who's in marketing, and Kareem, they were not volunteers, they were voluntold. they had to be there, you know, and it is up to us to remember them, you know, as he's gone now, and try to, where we can help them do that, because their father served. He may not have been in the army, we have a military organization, but he was in the army of the Lord. He was in the army of service. He was in the army of community. He was in the army of love, because that's what it really takes. And I think it's a high honor and privilege for you, Sister Doris and Brother Larry Sinders of Carib Nation, to gather us here today to sort of give a little insight into the caliber of a man that we've lost. We lost a giant in our community.
Yes.
And we shall remember him.
I wanted to look a little bit at the family side, and I think, Hazel, you might have an insight into that, to talk a little bit about that dynamic between running the business, keeping busy in the community, and balancing the family. And I'm sure you must have seen a lot of that back and forth and give and take. And I wanted to bring a little bit of that in, because we hear a lot about the professional side and the public side. But as Gabe brought it up, the sacrifice and how that affects the relationship in the family is also very important.
Okay, so when I met Curtis, I think Kareem, who is the last, he was a toddler, maybe. And so Curtis used to bring him to the office. So Sonia is a nurse, so she would go to work.
Mhm.
Curtis would bring Kareem, put him down with his blanket and everything, and I'm the baby. Well, I got to keep an eye on him. He get Curtis on the phone. But so Curtis is balancing the babysitting, because of course, I guess it's probably better to just take him to the office. So then when Sonia comes from work, she'll pick him up, take him home while Curtis stays. And so they balance that for a very long time. He still made the family picnics and the little, the get-togethers, and the getting of. So I got to meet all of Curtis. They thought I was Jamaican. I gave that story, like
Yes.
they introduced me to the ambassador, Wayne McCook, and it's like Curtis said, here, so Wayne is introducing me to someone. He says, come and meet this beautiful Jamaican lady. So the gentleman said, what part of Jamaica are you from? I said, Port of Spain. He says, that's Trinidad. I said, exactly. He said, you Trini? I said, to the marrow. He says, Hazel, you are Trini? How long did I know you? I said, at least 10, 15. He's like, how did I not know you? You Trini? I thought you were Jamaican. I'm like, no, I work in a Jamaican law firm. But because Curtis and they were so warm, that was my introduction into the Jamaican community. Because as Nigel had said, there's that separation between Jamaicans and Trini and this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's when I really got to know Jamaicans, when I fell into the Ward family, and I really felt like family. All of the nephews and the cousins, I was there for Sonia's mom when she passed, her father when he passed, Curtis's, everybody. And so they're that warm, loving, when they get together, it's just fun, and it's a huge family. It's very expensive, but Curtis always had time to spend with his family. Yeah, they love to dance, party. Yeah, so I got to be a part of all of that. So yeah. And then, well, of course, Maisha and Tammy, they were in school. They'll come stop by after school and, drop their books and do their homework. And so it's a nice little office with yeah. So that's
Let
the
me
family part
say
of it.
something on that side of it. I said we were in practice together. I know Gabe will know this too. The support that is needed, or that we have to have as lawyers from
Your spouse.
in order to carry out some of the work we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, if you don't have a good family support, it's extremely
It's not going to work.
difficult.
Well, I would say that as an
Curtis was a
entrepreneur,
family man, and he had good family support.
Yes, definitely.
He had absolutely good. I know what Hazel is talking about. His son was always in the office on the floor all around.
Yeah.
Curtis would be on the phone, and he would be on the phone on the desk.
Yeah.
My children came in and out of my office like if they lived there.
Yeah.
When they were kids.
Yeah.
That is part of
that's important.
Part of what we had to endure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a partner in an entrepreneurship.
Can't afford a babysitter.
Exactly.
You can't afford a babysitter. And so, I mean, there's there's something to be said for the family and how the family as a unit and how Curtis incorporated his family into that life and into his success and into one of the people at the program spoke about how when they wanted him to travel, he would always tell them, my wife is traveling with me.
Yeah.
And that is important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so he was a true family man, in addition to all of his advocacy, his ambassadorship, his whatever it is. When you get down to it, he was a family man.
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I explained at the funeral, that relationship between the two of them, I've never seen anything like it. They were like, we were saying Trini, Batty and Paul. It was so cute. You don't ever see Sonia without Curtis and vice versa. Always together. She's always his best supporter. And that, again, is what drives him, because that's his backbone. It said behind every good.
Yes, when you have that confidence that person
you have to get there. And she was his supporter 1000%.
Yeah.
Hats off to Sonia.
Yes. And I want to correct Sister Hazel. I endorse everything Nigel has said and what she said, but it's not behind. In front of every good man is a great woman.
In front of every, in front.
Let's give the women their props.
Miss Joan would love, listen.
Yes, she'd love to hear that.
Actually,
Mrs. Christian would love to hear that.
Well, actually, I must say, the reason I said that is Sonia and Curtis came a little late. But over the holiday, something came up where I had to say a few words, and I made the comment about behind every good man, and Miss Christian was standing. next to me. I said, no, 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 in front of.
In front of.
So
Okay.
I learned
Now
my
you have been
lesson, and
corrected.
I've gotten my PhD in front of study.
In front. Okay. All right. We're
Now
going to
you have
change
been
that.
corrected.
I've been ordered. You know, the judge's order has been signed, Brother Nigel.
Yeah.
Yes.
We know now what to say and what
Not
not
to
to
say.
say. And you know, all jokes aside, I mean, you know, as Brother Nigel said, you know, to do what we do is tough work. Nigel knows it. Hazel knows it. Doris knows it as being a husband. I mean, the wife of a husband who was in business. If you don't have that family support, man, it's not going to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did want to add one other thing about Curtis before we wrap up, and then I'll ask each of you to give a closing statement. But the Ward Post, we haven't talked a lot about that, but the Ward Post, I think, is very instrumental, or has been very instrumental in helping educate the Caribbean community about events and affairs affecting the Caribbean, and the relationship between the United States and the Caribbean, and the Caribbean's role in the world, so to speak. He's had a very worldly view of how the Caribbean fits in. And I think the Ward Post has been very instrumental, at least for me anyway, in helping to clarify, break down, explain so many things that we take for granted, we don't pay attention to, because they're put aside as something to do with politics, etc. But
Yeah.
I would also like to give credit to the Ward Post as one of the arms of his work, of his one of his many efforts. Just let me get a closing statement now from each of you before we close off, and see if there's anything else that we haven't said that we wanted to add to close off. Is there anything from anybody? Anything wants to add? Anything else? Yes, Gabe?
I think we're in a very pivotal time in human history. All of us here have lived most of our lives in the United States as US citizens. And we came here not to break down America, but to build it up. And we've given our best years. We would not have come to the United States unless there had been that sort of evolution that afforded people of color the opportunities that Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael of Trinidad sacrificed for. In fact, what many people don't know who are foreign-born is that in 1925, the 1925 Nationalities Act basically made it such that 80 to 90% of all immigrants to the United States came from Europe. They were European. There was actually public policy that discouraged immigration from Asia and Africa and Latin America. And it was only after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the passage of the new immigration bill signed by Lyndon B. Johnson that a new dispensation came up for family reunification. Right, Brother Nigel? That allowed for Asians, Latin Americans, Africans to come into the United States. And sadly, a lot of those immigrants have never credited African Americans for the sacrifices he made. And what Curtis really did was Curtis was able to bring us closer to our brothers and sisters who are African American. He was a proud West Indian, a proud Jamaican, but he was also a proud African American. And he saw the synchronicity between our struggle, like John Roswell, who came from Jamaica but started Freedom's Journal, and what was going on in Africa and the world. I want to share with you that he was very close to P.J. Patterson of Jamaica. And the Patterson Center on its website says, advocacy to advance the economic, social, and cultural development of Africa, the Caribbean, and our diaspora. That is what Curtis
That's
did.
what he was about. Yeah.
Advocated to advance the economic, social, and cultural development of Africa, the Caribbean, and our diaspora. Today, we have a situation where fishermen in places like St. Vincent, Trinidad, St. Lucia yesterday or last week are being killed.
Yeah.
This has not happened since World War II, when German U-boats came to the islands. And when I was at Georgetown, I picked up a book on the Nuremberg War Crimes Trial, where a German U-boat captain was given 40 years for machine gunning a boat full of fishermen off St. Vincent. This is where we are now. We're in a constitutional democracy where the Constitution, due process of law, right to the right to the presumption of innocence until proved guilty. All of those things are going out the window. As practitioners of law, as humanitarians, as persons who believe in a constitutional democracy, as Curtis did, he used the award post to illuminate for us a path of partnership as Caribbean people with the United States, founded not on racial discrimination or tyranny or fascism, but based on mutual respect and an equality of opportunity society in which democracy and rule of law prevailed. And if we move away from rule of law and democracy in the United States, it's going to impact our community terribly, and it's already impacting the Caribbean in a horrible way and is destroying the relationships that we've been trying to build all these years of peace, love, and one sort of American continent where all the nations of America, Canada, Mexico, the United States, Cuba, Jamaica, are treated with respect, are treated with the kind of humanitarian impulse without which all we have in the world is savagery and the birth of a new barbarism. That is what I believe we need to be focused on, because Curtis was focused in his last days on that sort of disregard for rule of law, disregard for the United Nations. He would not have liked it, and I think we have to do our best to save the United States from itself. Thank you.
Well, I want to add to what Gabe was saying, because one of the last pieces that Curtis wrote was exactly about that when he spoke about the situation that was affecting Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, and that ultimately resulted in the Maduro government. And he was talking about the role that the Trinidad Prime Minister was playing in that whole setup. And it emphasizes two things that I want to talk about for Curtis. His Caribbeanness, as Gabe has said, his integrity, and his determination to speak the truth and the facts as he saw them.
Always about truth.
And you know, we have to acknowledge that it takes courage sometimes to come out and say what you want and what is in your mind. And if you don't have that courage, you wouldn't do it. Curtis had that courage.
And quiet courage. He was not. He didn't make a big fuss about it.
He wasn't a screamer. He wasn't a violent person, but he had courage.
Great courage.
He had the courage of his conscience.
Yes.
And so we have to remember him and honor him for that.
Amen.
Okay, on that, I think we've done Curtis well. I hope we've covered as much as we could and given him the kudos and the credit for the work that he's done. I wanted people to see the other side. We've heard a lot about the ambassadorship, etc., but I think that some of these nuggets needed to be documented, and so that was why I wanted to make sure that we got this done.
And he loved Treasure Beach in St. Elizabeth. It was his desire to go back there with a container. He had already filled the container of supplies.
He did. Yes.
Melissa had destroyed or damaged Treasure Beach last year.
And that was his last big act, because I worked with him on that. And that the day that he said, I have to get this done tomorrow. Tomorrow's my deadline. I want to get this done. He was very, very determined to make sure that he could get as much as possible to Jamaica as quickly as possible. And so, well, thank you all, gentlemen, lady, for your contribution. I think this was a good discussion. And
God
thanks
bless you.
to you, our listeners, our viewers, for watching Carib Nation. The late Curtis Anthony Ward, former ambassador of Jamaica to the United States, lived an exceptionally great life of integrity, compassion, advocacy, and he leaves a legacy of integrity, compassion, love, and service. And so with that, I thank you again for watching Carib Nation. Until next time, I'm Doris Dean.